In the grand tapestry of the world's history, few sagas are as steeped in stone, steel, and sorrow as that of the Dwarfs. Their story is not one of fleeting kingdoms or transient glory, but an epic carved into the very bones of the earth. A testament to endurance against unimaginable odds. It began in an age of myth, long before the coming of men or the whispers of strife, when the world was young and the mountains stood tall and unbroken. Beneath the jagged snow-capped peaks of the world's edge mountains, a new race was born into the deep, quiet dark. These were the Dawi, the Dwarfs, a people as resilient and unyielding as the rock from which they would hew their homes. Their early days were a golden age, a time of unparalleled creation and discovery under the tutelage of their living deities. The ancestor gods, Grungni, Valaya, and Grimnir, walked amongst their children, their voices echoing in the vast stone halls. Grungni, the great smith, taught them the secrets of ore and metal, how to forge weapons of legendary power and jewels of breathtaking beauty. Valaya, the Hearth Mother, showed them the runes of protection and the bonds of clan that would forever define their society. From the living rock they carved magnificent cities, bastions of light and industry that delved deep into the heart of the world. But this age of idyllic prosperity was not to last. Far to the north and south, the colossal warped gates of the Old Ones, the world's ancient shapers, buckled and collapsed. Raw, undiluted magic flooded the world, and with it came the gibbering, malevolent hordes of chaos. The great catastrophe plunged the world into an age of terror, and the dwarfs found themselves on the front line of a war for survival. The first great war against chaos was a conflict of apocalyptic scale. From the newly formed chaos wastes in the north, legions of demons swarmed south, a tide of nightmare flesh and unholy rage. They crashed against the mountain holds, but the Dawi did not yield. Runic standards were raised, and great legions formed unbreakable shield walls in the mountain passes and cavernous halls, their axes and hammers reaping a bloody toll on the demonic invaders. Amidst the carnage, the ancestor god Grimnir, the Fearless, became a whirlwind of destruction. His twin axes felling greater demons by the score, yet even the dwarfs could not hold back the tide everywhere. To save their people, they made a desperate choice, sealing the lowest levels of the underway and their deepest holds, forever entombing vast riches and countless kin to contain the demonic surge from below. With the war raging and his people's existence in peril, Grimnir shaved his head, took up his axes, and marched north into the heart of the Chaos Wastes, a solitary warrior seeking to close the sorcery invasion, not with a triumphant victory, but with the exhausted resilience of a people who had paid an immeasurable price. The world was scarred, and the once mighty dwarf empire, the Karaz Ankor, was diminished. The ancestor gods were gone, either lost to the war or faded from the mortal world. The Golden Age was over. In the great hall of Karaz Ankor, the first High King stood before his assembled people. With a heavy heart and a grim sense of duty, he took up a quill and made the first entry into the Damaz Kron, the Great Book of Grudges. Every wrong, every betrayal, and every loss would be recorded, a solemn vow that no debt would ever be forgotten. This act marked the end of their age of innocence and the beginning of an age of remembrance, duty, and vengeance. Decades passed, and the dwarfs nursed their wounds in their mountain fastnesses, their trust in the outside world shattered. Then one day, a new sight appeared on the horizon. Tall, elegant ships with white sails landed on the shores of the old world. From them emerged the Asur, the High Elves of Ulthuan, led by the noble Prince Malekith. The first meeting between these two ancient races was one of caution and suspicion. The stern, stout dwarfs regarded the graceful, ethereal elves with deep-seated mistrust. Yet in their shared opposition to the lingering darkness of chaos, a bond was forged. This historic meeting laid the foundation for a great alliance. Trade flourished between the mountains and the coastal colonies, with dwarf steel and craft being exchanged for elven wine and textiles. For a time, a new dawn seemed possible, a friendship born from the ashes of a global war. And so a new chapter began, one that would see the two elder races stand together, their alliance destined to shape the fate of the world for millennia to come. In an age of myth and legend, two ancient races, once bound by an oath of friendship, were set upon a path of ruinous conflict. This was a war born not of necessity, but of pride, treachery, and an insult so profound it would echo through the millennia. This is the story of the War of the Beard. The conflict began in shadow, a masterfully woven tapestry of deceit orchestrated by the Witch King Malekith. From the cold lands of Nagaroth, his dark elf raiders, disguised and clandestine, descended upon the dwarf merchant caravans that crisscrossed the old world. They struck without warning, leaving trails of wreckage and slaughter, their true identities shrouded in malice. The High Elves of Ulthuan, blind in their own arrogance, failed to see the hidden hand guiding the blade. Instead, they laid the blame squarely upon the Dwarfs, accusing their former allies of treachery and greed, igniting the flames of mistrust. The simmering tension reached its breaking point when the Dwarfs dispatched an ambassador to the court of the Phoenix King. In an act of unparalleled contempt, the Elves shaved the ambassador's magnificent beard, a sacred symbol of a dwarf's honor, and sent him back to his people, shorn and shamed. The ultimate insult had been delivered. Music swells with the sound of war horns and hammering. The shamed ambassador returned to Karaz Ankor, the ancestral capital of the Dwarfs, and presented himself before High King Gotrek Starbreaker. Upon seeing the defilement, a fury unlike any seen before seized the High King. With a roar of pure rage, he took up his warhammer and struck the Damaz Kron, the Great Book of Grudges. The ancient tome cracked under the blow, and a new terrible entry was inscribed in blood and wrath. War was declared. From every mighty hold carved into the heart of the world's edge mountains, the call to arms was answered. The throngs mustered in numbers not seen since the dawn of their race. A tide of iron and steel, of beards and axes. Legions of unyielding warriors marched forth from their mountain gates, their hearts burning with a righteous fire for vengeance. The first battles were a testament to their fury. The Dwarfs, implacable and relentless, crashed against the elegant lines of the elven armies. They were an avalanche of retribution, a force of nature driven by a grudge that could only be settled in blood. Music becomes a slow, grinding, and sorrowful march. What followed was not a swift campaign, but a long, bitter war of attrition that would bleed both empires for centuries. The conflict consumed generations, as the Dwarfs laid siege to the magnificent elven cities and colonies scattered across the old world. Towers that had pierced the clouds for 1,000 years were brought crashing down by stone and cannon fire. The Elves, for all their martial prowess and powerful magic, could not halt the slow, grinding advance of the dwarf throngs. City after city fell to the relentless sieges, each victory for the Dwarfs costing them dearly in lives, but inching them closer to their goal. The Elves, too, suffered immensely, their armies whittled down, their colonies reduced to rubble, and their pride shattered against the unyielding wall of dwarf resolve. The war reached a bloody crescendo in a massive engagement near the elven metropolis of Toralessi. Here, the Phoenix King Kalidor II, a proud and determined monarch, led the largest high elf army ever assembled in the old world to halt the dwarf advance once and for all. Music shifts to a climactic yet tragic theme. Amidst the swirling chaos of the final battle, two kings met in a fateful duel that would decide the war. High King Gotrek Starbreaker, his face a mask of grim determination, faced Phoenix King Kalidor II, the last hope of the elves in the old world. Axe met sword in a clash of titans, but the righteous fury of the dwarfs proved unstoppable. Gotrek's mighty axe, rune-etched and thirsting for vengeance, struck the final blow, and the Phoenix King fell. With their monarch slain, the spirit of the high elf army broke. They began a full-scale withdrawal from the old world, abandoning their colonies and retreating to their island home of Ulthuan, leaving a continent scarred by war. High King Gotrek returned to Karaz Ankor and, with a heavy hand, struck the great grudge from the Damaz Kron. The debt was paid, but the victory was hollow. The golden age of the dwarfs was over. Their armies were decimated, their treasury emptied, and their vast empire weakened. Many of their mighty holds, now underdefended, became vulnerable to the encroaching tides of orcs and goblins, beginning a long, slow decline from which they would never truly recover. In the Age of Reckoning, when the mountains themselves groan under the weight of an ancient sorrow, the sagas of heroes and the chronicles of doom are etched into the very stone of the world. These are the tales of crumbling empires and rising tides of darkness, of desperate last stands and the insidious whispers that bring kingdoms to ruin, a testament to the bitter struggles that define an era of unending war. The burden of an entire race rests upon the stooped shoulders of the dwarf High King, Thorgrim Grudgebearer. His throne is not one of comfort, but of cold, hard stone, much like the resolve in his heart. A long, gray beard, plaited with the jewels of his ancestors and stained by the smoke of 1,000 battles, flows over a chest clad in weathered Gromrel armor, each dent and scratch a story of loss and retribution. His eyes, though clouded with the sorrow of ages and the memory of countless fallen kin, burn with a fierce, unyielding determination. He is the last bulwark against the encroaching dark, the guardian of the Great Book of Grudges, where every slight, every betrayal, and every murdered dwarf is recorded, awaiting the day of bloody vengeance. His reign is not one of glory, but of grim necessity, a long, slow retreat into the heart of the mountains, fighting for every inch of stone. From the fetid caves and dark forests, a different kind of king arises, one whose crown is fashioned from the bones of his rivals and whose authority is enforced by brute strength and primal cunning. The goblin warlord, Skarsnik, is a master of ambush and treachery, a creature of spite and ambition. His lithe, green-skinned frame is a coiled spring of wiry muscle, perpetually ready to lash out. Clad in a patchwork of scavenged armor, trophies taken from ambushed caravans and defeated foes, he wields a crude, wickedly notched chopper that has tasted the lifeblood of men, elves, and dwarves alike. His cruel, intelligent eyes gleam with a malevolent light, always calculating, always searching for weakness. He is a plague upon the surface world, a testament to the fact that even the smallest, most cowardly creatures can become a terrifying threat when led by a mind as sharp and merciless as his. Far beneath the ground, in a sprawling, chaotic under-empire of filth and madness, a far more insidious evil thrives. The Skaven Grey Seer, Thankwall, is an agent of the Horned Rat, a hunched, twitching creature whose gray fur is matted with grime and whose every movement is a symphony of paranoia and scheming. His eyes, glowing with the sickly green light of raw warpstone, betray a fractured but dangerously potent intellect. He is clad in dark, tattered robes that do little to hide his grotesque, rat-like form, and he clutches a gnarled staff topped with a pulsing chunk of pure warpstone, the source of his foul sorcery. Thankwall does not seek open battle, but thrives on manipulation, plague, and civil strife, whispering promises of power into the ears of greedy men and ambitious rivals, only to watch with glee as their civilizations rot from within. Against these tides of greenskin malevolence and verminous corruption stands the unyielding line of the dwarf Ironbreaker. Encased from head to toe in magnificent suits of gromrel plate, these warriors are the living embodiment of the dwarf race's resilience. Their faces, grim and resolute, are often hidden behind full helms, their identities subsumed by the duty they uphold. In the claustrophobic darkness of the deep tunnels, they form an impenetrable shield wall, a living fortress of metal and metal. Each Ironbreaker is a veteran of countless subterranean wars, their resolve as unbending as the ancient stone they defend. They are the guardians of the deeps, the silent sentinels who face unspeakable horrors so that their kin in the halls above may know a moment is peace. And so the sagas are written, not in ink, but in the lifeblood of heroes in the ruin of empires, a chronicle of a world teetering on the precipice of annihilation. This is the grim chorus of a dying age, where the only certainty is war and the only hope lies in the strength to endure one more day, one more battle, one more bitter grudge. In an age of unending war and bitter decline, the dwarfen race endures, their resilience forged in mountain fire and tempered by millennia of hardship. Yet, for some, the weight of their history is too much to bear. In the grim aftermath of personal disaster or unforgivable shame, a dwarf may find that their life is no longer their own. Forsaking clan, kin, and even their own name, they undertake a final, desperate pilgrimage. This is the path of the Slayer, a vow to seek a glorious and honorable death in combat against the most formidable foes the world can muster. With a crest of fiery hair atop a shaven head, they march into the darkest corners of the world, a living embodiment of doom. Unarmored and unyielding, they hurl themselves into battle with a reckless fury born of despair. Their twin axes a whirlwind of destruction against hulking trolls, lumbering giants, and even the calamitous might of dragons. They do not fight for victory, but for a worthy end, an atonement written in blood and fury. Among the countless grudges that fuel the dwarf's rage, none burns hotter than the loss of their great holds. The most coveted of these fallen fortresses is Karaz Ankor, once a city of unimaginable wealth and masterful engineering, now a sprawling tomb infested with the foulest of creatures. Yet the flame of vengeance is not so easily extinguished. From the line of its vanquished kings comes Belegar Ironhammer, the true heir of the Hold, who has sworn a mighty oath to reclaim his ancestral home, or die in the attempt. Gathering a small, doughty band of warriors, he leads a perilous expedition back into the heart of the mountain. Against overwhelming odds, they fight their way through hordes of greenskins and vermin, clawing their way into the upper levels of the hold. There, amidst the rubble of his forefathers' glory, Belegar establishes a precarious foothold, a lone bastion of dwarfen defiance in a city consumed by darkness. But Belegar's beleaguered forces are far from alone in the cavernous expanse of the fallen city. The king finds himself besieged from all sides, caught in a deadly three-way war for control of the mountain. From the festering tunnels deep below, the skittering hordes of the Skaven emerge. Led by the notoriously vicious Queek Headtaker, the warriors of Clan Moors swarm the lower levels, their sheer numbers threatening to drown the dwarfs in a tide of claws and teeth. Meanwhile, from the jagged peaks that give the city its name, another enemy holds sway. The cunning and cruel warlord Skarsnik commands the Crooked Moon Goblins, masters of ambush and devious traps, who control the surface and the upper halls. Epic battles erupt in the ruined, echoing chambers of Karak Eight Peaks, as the axes of the dwarfs clash against the rusted blades of goblins and the warpstone-tainted weaponry of the Skaven. The desperate quest to reclaim the city descends into a brutal and bitter stalemate, a bloody microcosm of the dwarf's greater struggle against a hostile world. Belegar Ironhammer, his resolve hardened by the spectral presence of his ancestors who fight alongside him, refuses to yield a single stone. He is the anvil upon which his enemies break, yet the cost is immense. Skarsnik, the self-proclaimed warlord of Eight Peaks, whittles down the dwarven numbers with clever ambushes and deadly traps laid in the winding tunnels. At the same time, Queek Headtaker relentlessly throws his endless legions of clan rats against Belegar's shield wall, seeking to overwhelm the defenders through sheer attrition. The war for the City of Pillars becomes a grim testament to dwarven defiance. The video ends on a final poignant image. Belegar Ironhammer, seated upon his throne in a reclaimed hall, his face a mask of grim determination, surrounded by enemies, besieged on all fronts. He stands as a symbol of his people's unbreakable will to endure, a lone king fighting against impossible odds for the fading glories of a bygone age. In the final age of the world, when the winds of magic howled with apocalyptic fury, the very bones of the earth began to break. Deep beneath the World's Edge Mountains, a cataclysmic earthquake, engineered by foul sorcery, rocked the foundations of the Dwarf Empire. It was a tremor that did not just shatter stone, but sundered an ancient and proud civilization. From the countless tunnels and crevices torn open by the quake, a living nightmare erupted. It was a chittering, squealing sea of filth, fur, and rusted blades, the Skaven. This was not a raid, not another border skirmish. This was the Vermintide, the great drowning wave that heralded the end times. The first bastion to feel their unholy numbers was the Slayer Keep of Karak Kadrin. Here, the oath-bound slayers, dwarves seeking a glorious death in battle, would find their ultimate doom. King Ungrim Ironfist, the Slayer King himself, stood upon the battlements, a figure of grim resolve against an ocean of vermin. Alongside his brethren, he led a final, glorious stand. Axes rose and fell, carving bloody paths through the ratland, each slayer taking dozens of the creatures with him. Yet for every Skaven that fell, 10 more swarmed over its corpse. It was a saga sung in blood and defiance, a heroic, but utterly hopeless final stand against the encroaching darkness. The chittering tide did not stop at Karak Kadrin. It flowed onward, a relentless river of ruin, until it crashed against the mighty gates of Karaz Ankor, the evergreen, the eternal capital of the dwarf people. Here, within the grandest fortress ever wrought, the heart of the Empire prepared for its final moments. High King Thorgrim Grudgebearer, the last of his long line, sat upon the ancient throne of power. With a heavy hand and a heart of stone, he took up his stylus and carved one last great entry into the Damazkrone, the Great Book of Grudges. The final grudge, the ultimate reckoning against the Skaven for the annihilation of his race, was now eternally recorded. As the siege engines of the Ratman pounded against the adamantium gates, a presence of profound evil manifested upon the battlefield, and the sky itself seemed to curdle. From the roiling chaos, a horned shadow coalesced. The great horned rat, the vile god of the Skaven, had come in person. It ascended to oversee the final destruction of its most hated enemies, its divine malevolence impelling the horde to a fever pitch of frenzied violence. The defenders of Karaz Ankor looked upon the avatar of their doom, and for the first time in millennia, the unbreakable spirit of the dwarfs began to crack. As all hope seemed to fade and the last defenses began to crumble, a miracle occurred. A figure of blinding light and primordial fury descended upon the battlefield, an icon of legend made real. It was Grimdark, the ancestor god of slayers, reborn in an avatar of pure, vengeful energy. He was a whirlwind of divine retribution, his twin axes reaping a terrible toll upon the Skaven, carving a path through their ranks as a meteor carves through the sky. Inspired by this divine intervention, himself, he became a living battering ram. The ancient throne, a priceless artifact of his people, crashed into the elite storm vermin bodyguard of the Skaven leadership, shattering their lines and their commanders. Thorgrim died as he had lived, a king to the very end, taking the masterminds of the invasion with him in a final cataclysmic act of vengeance. Despite these acts of impossible heroism, the battle was lost before it had even begun. The sheer unending number of the Skaven was a force that courage alone could not defeat. One by one, the great holds were shattered, their vast halls silenced, their people slaughtered. The Dwarf Empire, which had stood for thousands of years as a bastion of order and tradition, had fallen. Soon after, the world itself was torn asunder, its fate sealed by the victory of chaos. Their world ended. Their grudges were eternal. Their courage, legendary. Thank you for watching this saga. Like and subscribe for more tales from history and myth.